Okay, we are back in part two. So, Jarryd, thanks again. We are talking about your academy, the tailored process you have, the funding process, and the fact that you kind of will match the energy and the commitment that your students have. And obviously that makes sense. There's no point putting in 80, 90% if the student just can't commit for whatever reason. Everyone has circumstances, family, work, etc., etc. How far spread out are your students that you have actually in Australia? I mean, we'll talk about your international students next, but the ones you have there, how far spread out are they, and how often do you see them?
Geographically, you mean?
Geographically, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say most of my students are local, and I see them. And the way that we run our development squad training is we have 4 sessions per week, and so that's increased recently, and that's going really, really well. So now, depending on the student, like I said, sometimes I see them once or twice a week. Some students I'm seeing 4 times a week. And you would expect the people that are there 4 times a week are getting amazing progress, and they're the ones that are just absolutely steamrolling, and ahead, and nothing's going to slow them down. I do have some students that are a little bit further apart. So Ilias, one of my top students, actually is, and he's going all the ways. He's stacking wins and winning championships and going for national team selection and everything, and Olympic gold. Yeah, he lives a little bit further away, a few hours away, and he lives down in a place called Mullumbimby, which is, like, archery is a big country, right? So from Brisbane, that's about a 2.5, 3 hour drive.
Wow.
And so for him, like obviously that requires a slightly different approach, and it requires a lot more autonomy from him with his own training as well. But we are talking almost on a daily basis at sometimes about things like that. Yeah.
Excellent. You mentioned about, Olympic level, etc., and they're getting really high standard. What recognition do you have from, I don't know if it's called Archery Australia or the governing body of archery or whatever, that pathway of getting them into kind of, team and getting recognized and Olympic level? Have you had any connections with them?
Yeah, of course. So, a number of my archers over the years have gone through different development pathways and things like that with Archery Australia. Also, Archery Australia has changed its development pathways and things over the years. So I guess what I'm trying to do is provide, like a consistent development pathway. And because archery is, Australia is very big geographically. It's different to some other countries which do have a very sort of structured development pathway, and really what I've tried to do through Rogue Archery is kind of develop the development structure that I wish was there for me when I was coming up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in Australia, really, your development is very much dependent on the coach you have, your personal coach.
Sure.
And it's really only once you get onto national teams and things that you start to, get access to, the high performance pathways and things like that.
Yeah. Where does the name Rogue come from?
Yeah, good question. So that similar to what I was just saying, I always felt that when I was coming up, there was, I was trying to do initiatives and start coaching programs and things within the local club and the regional sort of circuit here. And there was always almost like an inertia to the way that things have always been done. I wanted to start school programs like what you've done by the sound of it. And, the clubs didn't really want to do it. It's not really what they had done. It's just, not quite there. And I wanted to do more structured professional coaching at the clubs. And again, that was, not the way we do it. And so I was just very frustrated.
You wanted to be a bit of a rebel.
Sort of. So I just always felt like, right, if I'm going to get this done, I've got to go rogue to get it done. And so that's really where the Rogue Archery has come from.
Excellent.
And that's kind of like the origins, I guess, of Rogue Archery.
Nice. And I guess maybe it does attract a certain type of person as well. You may not have your typical traditional archer that you would get in normal clubs. You've probably got a quite well, I know you do, you have a good diverse set of students. Tell us a little bit about that. Maybe pick out a couple. You mentioned Ilyas as one. Tell us about a couple more that come to mind.
Oh man, we have so many other students. So for example, I've got everything from Ilyas, who's a Greek 42-year-old hippie who lives in Mullumbimby and then we've got Halima, who's an 11-year-old girl, a Muslim girl who's just absolutely crushing it and smashing goals over all the time. We've got Richard, one of my students, who's like in his sort of 60s and he's doing very well. Honestly, we've got such a diverse group across age, gender, different denominations of religion and things. And like Australia is a pretty multicultural society and things, so we have a broad cross section. And my thoughts on this is basically, if you want to come and you want to shoot arrows, you're welcome. And so I really like what you've called your school, I guess, which is Archery for All. I really love that, man. I think that's really cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, again, similar story with my things that we were talking about before, is that I kind of flipped the coin, and instead of people having to go to an archery club which is not always accessible for everyone, we try to make it accessible and bring it into schools or bring it into more urban communities for people who would never really have the chance to do that. I want to, let's quickly talk about your international students as well. I guess they contact you online and they want some help and things like that. How does, if I contact you, for example, Jarryd, I'm in, Portugal or something like that, and I need some coaching tips and stuff like that, how would that relationship look like? What would happen?
Yeah, really good point. So maybe before we touch on that, I think I'd be interested in sort of sharing with you a little bit about how I got into the online stuff.
Please.
Because really, that was quite interesting. And I think, I really admire what you're doing. I think this is awesome, knowledge sharing and connecting with different people around the world. And I think it's so important for people to tap into those resources. And I think more people should be doing it, putting stuff out there, putting content out there, putting, knowledge sharing and opening up new discussions. And really for me, how it started was, obviously I'm coaching, been coaching for quite a while and things. And I'm not a full-time coach, actually. Like I'm a professional engineer and I've been working and training myself and coaching at the same time. And somehow, I'm married and stay that way. And hopefully, and, so it's always been, time management has been hard for me as well as time management for students. So one of the things that was always a barrier was, especially as I started to grow my school and grow my number of students, was I'm teaching kind of the same things over and over again. You're teaching basic process and basic things. So what I wanted to do was start to create almost like resources for archers so that they can accelerate that and kind of take the load off, because my time was a barrier for my students as you get more students. And so
there's only one Jarryd and there's like 50 students, right? So you can't be everywhere or on.
Yeah. And so really what I started to do was, and one of the first YouTube videos I did was coaching case studies, where I literally just coached someone and I turned a camera on and I just filmed myself coaching people. And I just thought, who the hell is going to watch this crap? And, no one's going to care. And, maybe, you put yourself out there online, you might think people, the internet keyboard coaches are going to rip you apart and just going to be a disaster. But actually my experience was completely the opposite of that. And people really responded to those coaching case studies. Like it's completely like basically no editing other than just clipping it all together in some sort of coherent way. But it's just me interacting with like a pretty rookie archer, at least initially. And the feedback from that was like amazingly positive.
Wow.
Because there's lots of content about what to do and what not to do. The gap is how to do it, right?
Right.
So like you can watch videos and they'll explain like alignment. It's great. Okay, you know what alignment is. And then you can try and do it. And what happens if you can't? How do you actually implement it? And so actually showing the coaching interventions, the corrections, the drills, like the exercises, like the questions that the student has as we're going through that process. It was almost like people resonated with that, like the hands-on coaching experience.
Process, yeah.
So it was just having a crack, and once I started putting that stuff out, like the questions kept coming in and the feedback was positive, and so I just started doing more of that. And then what I've now tried to create, and it's gone pretty well actually, is the Rogue Archery Masterclass. So that is basically the full online video coaching curriculum, which runs through the drills, the exercises, the theory, the practical, the training programs, how to plan a training program, how to structure a weekly training regime, the coaching interventions, examples, case study, all that stuff is through that platform. Yeah. And so again, because my time is a limiting factor, when someone approaches me, they'll say, "What'd you say, from Portugal?"
Yeah.
And let's say someone from Portugal gets in contact and says that they want to get in touch, I'd refer them through that.
Got you.
And they get basically an insane amount of resources, like for not much money, but then they get part of the community as well, and they can kind of work their way through it, ask questions, because rather than just like, if I was to do one-on-one video coaching with, say, an individual archer, it would be it's very, very difficult to articulate what they're doing wrong and then guide them through the drills and stuff if they don't have that access to all that foundational knowledge. Yeah. So what I use is, that's like a platform, and then from there, then we can work on implementing that with them individually, and I can say, hey,
fill in the gaps.
Yeah, Steffi, one of my students from Germany, like, she's crushing it, and so with her, she would like send me video updates, and we would do some analysis, and I could say, hey, look, here, this is looking really good. Your alignment's coming along better, but as you're expanding, you're losing your posture this way. You need to go back and you need to look at the expansion module and do the drills in, under shot execution, section of the course. So we're using that as like a reference, almost like the framework from which to build up. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. That is that's really awesome. Couple of questions I just wrote down while you were explaining that is, did you have any, I guess, kickback or kind of critics from when you did start putting stuff online? Maybe keyboard warriors are like, oh, you don't really know what you're talking about, this is wrong, that's wrong, and things like that, or it was just more, a lot more positive than negative?
It was way more positive than negative, 100%. So it was more about, like, biggest barrier was my own confidence, is like putting yourself out there. Like, of course, you get the occasional keyboard warrior who
correct you,
have a crack online, but it's honestly, it's not even 100 to 1, it's like 1,000 to 1.
Right.
And the positive feedback is just so much more positive.
Way much more. Excellent.
And honestly, I just think that comes, if anyone else out there is thinking about putting out content, I'd be interested in your experience too on this. Is it just comes from being genuine and just trying to help people.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you just do that, then the rest will work itself out.
It will come through for sure.
What's been your experience with that? Because you're putting out
to be honest, I haven't turned the camera on myself. A lot of my work, like I say, is in schools, so we do have kind of a safeguarding issue. We can't always have certain kids on camera or take photographs and stuff like that. Yeah. So we have that. I've done a little bit of one-to-one coaching, maybe for certain modules or qualifications that I'm doing to as proof of my work and stuff like that, but I haven't taken that step of I guess opening myself up, doing it online. I mean, you mentioned, you're an engineer by trade, you got maybe a full-time job, and you've got all this archery coaching stuff. The coaching sounds like a full-time thing anyway. How do you I guess split your time between your work, and then you've got the coaching, you've got the actual one-to-one coaching of actual people in Australia, and then you've got the online stuff, and linked to that, your YouTube page? Do you have, I guess people might assume, oh, he's got like an editing team behind him, he's got a cameraman, he's got a whole setup and a studio, is that right, or is it just like you're like a one-man band type of thing?
Yeah, mate, we're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and yeah, but no, honestly, everything I started as I was the coach, I was the equipment maintenance coordinator, I was the marketing manager, I was the janitor, you know,
Everything.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm not going to pretend that that's like a biggest thing for Rogue Archery growing and being successful, particularly this year, has been me learning how to scale, and a big part of that is putting trust in others. So putting trust in my coaching team, and my focus now, particularly with the beginner programs, is not to coach the beginners as I see it, but to coach the coaches on how to coach the beginners.
Got you.
And my experience with that, just like how you go into you go into online stuff we're talking about, we're expecting it to be a negative experience and it's overwhelmingly positive. You expect other people to fail, and they have impressed me so much. So I'm so grateful for my coaching team. And as a team, we're 10 times better than I could be by myself.
Sure.
Because we plug each other's knowledge gaps, and even we look at things from a different perspective, and we work together, and we collaborate, and the result is infinitely better.
Yeah.
So that's been a big thing for me, and anyone who's looking to grow their coaching influence, I would say that'll be something to look out for. Yeah. And I had to go through an ego death for that to happen, because there's a perception, you have this self-perception that, okay, I'm the only one that can coach this way. And so,
and you want everything done your way as well.
Well, yeah. Or you don't trust anyone to do that. So
yeah,
you almost have to go through that ego death to be able to trust others, and put your faith in them to do it. And I've only been impressed. Like, of course, there's time, like, let's not kid around. There's times when I would do things differently, or mistakes happen or whatever. But the net result of collaboration and of working together is, like I said, easily so 10 times more.
Yeah. No, look, I can't lie. I'm definitely envious that you have a coaching team. In my experience, again, scaling up is always been a problem. There's only one of you, and there's like 5 schools, and you can only do like 1 school a day, and you can't be in 2 places at once. So I've really tried to find other coaches, young up and coming enthusiastic archers, try to encourage them. I'll give them equipment, I'll give them the kit bag, I'll give them the school. It's like literally you just need to walk into that school and just deliver the session. My barrier has been just that, how can I say, there's a very small pool of people that I'm appealing to, or that I'm looking for. And I understand everyone's got commitments and things like that, but finding committed people who want to do archery full time is like blood out of a stone, because I get it. It's not it's not a certified 9-to-5 job. It's not a recognized job either. People, like, when I tell them I'm an archery coach, they're like, okay, what else do you do? That type of thing. And as if like, okay, you need, all right, I'm not going to die a millionaire, but it's something I enjoy, and I was able to make my hobby my work. But
absolutely,
to find other like-minded people for me has been such a struggle. So I'm definitely envious that you've found that. But I'm sure that it's not like they just suddenly turned up. It takes time to find these people.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm not going to pretend like it's no different here. Like, I did everything myself for 10 years. I hardly paid myself anything, just covering expenses and just doing it, spending my evenings and weekends doing it for, just for the love of it. The biggest jump was that me putting faith in others, and really what I look for in my coaches, and something for you to think about as well, is perhaps just the passion. I can teach someone how to teach archery, but you can't fake enthusiasm and passion for the sport and the right cultural fit of someone who's like enthusiastic about helping the students. Like, you could have the best technical archery coach in the world,
right,
and then put him next to someone who will just do anything and die for their students. I'd take the second person any day of the week, because That's
You
what's required.
can't teach passion, right?
You can't teach it, and you can't fake it.
Yeah.
You can fake it for a week, and coaching is not a week-long vacation. So
definitely.
That's all I look for. And then from there, I just look for people who are hungry to learn and who are passionate and who want to help people. And then they impress me. Like quite frankly, yeah, it's awesome.
How many coaches do you have under you right at the moment?
6 coaches at the moment. Actually, that might be including myself. So, and some, working in different capacities across our beginner programs and holiday programs and coaching team and everything.
And are they? I mean, you're giving them enough work. They're working like on it full time.
No. So some of them. So for example, Sarah, one of my coaches, she's working part-time for me, part-time as a para coach for Archery Australia with some of the para team.
Right.
And so that is like kind of a 50-50 role for her. Will, one of my top instructors who runs a lot of our beginner programs, he's at uni finishing off his thesis in archaeology, and so he's working again kind of part-time, maybe 20 hours a week. And then also Nino is one of my coaches who runs our weekend programs, and he is also doing his TAFE course and diesel mechanic certification. And then Bo is like a pretty green archer, but he's like keen to he's keen to like develop into an archery coach, and so we're sort of mentoring him as like an assistant, and he's doing kind of his archery coaching apprenticeship.
He sounds like a natural coach. I like the name.
Bo, yeah.
Deep joke. No, that's amazing. I mean, it's so lucky to be able to find these people. I've had coaches, stay with me for a couple of months, 6 months, and then they either go off to uni or they find a full-time job or they get married or whatever. And everyone's,
how dare they, honestly, like get married and
terrible. I know, so inconsiderate. How dare you have a life? But I get that. But I've seen a lot of people come and go. But I'm still very fortunate to be stuck with the archery.
And on that, so before we move on, I know we've got a heap of questions to get to and stuff, but as well, basically my coaches will go through almost like a year of an apprenticeship as a coach before they start to take on a program of their own. So just started with one coach as my assistant. And then we slowly me running the course and them helping, and then us running the course together, and then them running the course with me helping until the point where I'm no longer needed. And now I can step back. Yeah. I can now just support them in whatever way they need without having to be, purely dependent on it. But it's been like a 2 or 3 years of building that up.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I would be lucky just to, even have a coach for a year, for them to be able to stick with it. Obviously, I think they see there's definitely a lot of admiration that they see in you. I think you're probably a natural leader for them as well. They want to stick with that, and obviously they have that passion and fire. They definitely enjoy the archery. So all of that in a bundle is exactly what you want as a coach. Let us jump into your trip to South Korea. That was like a couple of weeks ago, I think. How did it come about? How did you get the contact there? How long were you there for? Tell us all the good bits. We know South Koreans are top archers in the world, so don't tell us that. What gems did you come back from that trip with?
So this is not my first time in Korea. I've been to Korea several times and shot there several times. My wife is actually South Korean heritage, so we have family over there, and I spent a bit of time there. I got married in Australia and did a wedding in Korea as well for the Korean side of the family. So so
it's a family holiday too.
Yeah, exactly. And my wife also has a background as a sports manager. So she actually used to work in Korea as a manager for the International Paralympic Committee in South Korea.
Oh, great. Wow.
And so she has a background in professional and amateur sports in Korea, as well as, the cultural understanding and things like that. So that
now I understand why you're able to spend so much time doing archery. You have a very understanding wife.
She's good. She's good. Yeah. So, this trip, we went there, obviously we're seeing family, but also I reached out and was very fortunate to be invited by Coach Kim Dong-guk to the Korean National Sport University. So, which is KNSU. He's one of the head coaches there. So I was very, very grateful and fortunate to be invited there. One thing I think to understand, so obviously, we all know Koreans, there's almost like a mystical thing about them. Yeah, we all know that they have secret techniques and they train in ninja warrior archery camps from the time they can carry a water bucket.
Born. Yeah.
Yeah, and they meditate under a waterfall, thinking, all this sort of mystical stuff. But actually, like it's not like that quite. So in Korea, archery is a professional sport. Not an amateur sport like in Australia and in the UK as well. And so in Korea, you do archery, you're on a team. And if you're not on a team, you're retired. Wow. So there's not really a community aspect. So it's like there's obviously a lot we can learn, but it's very, very different. You can't just rock up to an archery club in Korea and join up. And you can't just rock up, even as a coach or an archer, just go and shoot there. You have to be invited.
So how is it? Let me just stop you there. So how is it? Because one of the problems we got in the UK is supply, right? We every year we're trying to get more people into the sport, more people, and there's just never enough. But in Korea, it's as if they're like it's like you don't have that choice. You, like you just said, you can't just rock up to an archery club. You have to be invited. So how is it that they've got that ability to pick and choose? Yeah. So
that's a good question, but it requires a different way of thinking.
Okay.
Because it's not picking and choosing. Archery is a real career pathway in Korea.
Right.
So the way the pathway works in Korea is very structured. It's not that complicated. Basically, they in middle school, so 12, 13 years old, they have certain not every school in South Korea, but certain middle schools will do archery as part of their sporting curriculum. And so what they do is they introduce a large number of archers in middle school to archery at those schools. The ones that have an aptitude, and they do a lot of work on basic process and position with therabands and things like that, and demonstrate an aptitude with the technique and with shooting, are kind of recruited into the archery program there. And then there's high schools which have archery programs. And so, you would go from the middle school archery program into the high school where they teach you just basic form, basic position, stuff like that. Right. And it's all kind of pretty structured, pretty good technique from an early age.
And this is kind of part of their curriculum, just like, okay, so archery is a national sport there, just like in the UK, football or what you call soccer like maybe is a national sport. So it's a given, right? So it's just part of their curriculum. They're going to do it every day.
Correct. So just like in the UK, you might be on the middle school soccer team or hockey team or cricket team or whatever. You would be on the middle school archery team. And then basically, then there's high schools that focus on archery as well. Not every high school, but there are high schools that focus on archery. And so the ones who do well in middle school can get recruited into the high school archery program. And that is famously where they basically like bake them into elite archers. So
robots.
They're doing a lot. Yeah, well, not quite, but yeah, they're doing a lot of training, lot of hours, lot of hours as they're in high school. And really what they're fighting for at this point in time is a scholarship. So because you can get a full scholarship to, again, I was at the university archery team at KNSU. So these are athletes who have gone through that program from middle school to high school, have done well on the high school competition circuit, and are then recruited into the university team, and they're on full scholarship through university as a professional athlete or as a university athlete.
Right.
And then, so the high level of competition at middle school, high school, and university. And then once they go through the university circuit, and there's been recently a series of national university competitions in Korea with very high level of competition, they can actually get scouted and recruited into a professional archery team in Korea. Get paid a salary to train and compete. And they obviously get performance bonuses and incentives for how they do on the national circuit, as well as everyone wants to be on the Olympic team and the
Mm.
national team, and there are obviously appropriate incentives to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how the structure of development works in Korea. And
Right.
yeah.
So for this, a couple of things come to mind. There needs to be like a shed load of coaches to supply all of these schools, high schools, and things like that. And I guess these coaches are either ex-Olympic archers or very high, or they kind of nearly made the grade but didn't quite make it, so now they're teaching it. Number two, can someone who doesn't quite make it to the Olympic level still kind of live off being an archer at second place or third place? And number three, all of this has to be funded. So who's funding it? Is it government? Is it private funding? How does that work?
I know I have ideas about all of this stuff. I probably can't answer that explicitly, but I'll try and give you my understanding of it. They might I don't want to misspeak and say something wrong.
No, sure, of course.
But my understanding is that it is a national sport in Korea, and obviously South Korea does very well in the Olympics, and so there is a level of national funding, particularly for the Olympic and World Cup teams and like those teams there, as most countries do have, Olympic funding programs and things. Yep. So that's no different really. And certainly most countries pour most money into the sports they do well at. So that's also not that outrageous to think about. But there is also the professional archery teams I was talking about are privately funded. Now, I don't know how much you want to go into this, but the South Korean economy is also a little bit different in terms of there's like kind of three companies that run the entire economy.
Okay. Right.
Like Hyundai, Samsung, LG, they're the companies that the entire economy kind of, it's like 80% of the economic
based
turnaround,
on,
right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that they have they sponsor professionally those archery teams, and they sponsor the leagues and everything like that.
Okay, cool.
And so there is immense national pride in Korea about how well they do in archery. And, when you speak to a South Korean and you tell them that you do archery, they'll often say, "Oh, did you know that Korea is good at archery?" It's like, "Yeah, I heard about it." so even if they're not an archer, even if they're not an archer, even if they don't know how good you are or what your background is, even if they don't follow the Korean archer, they know that they're good at it. And there is an immense national pride that gets behind it. So it is, culturally it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think Korea is definitely one of those countries that it straddles both worlds. It's definitely kept hold of its historical archery heritage, and it's also on top of the modern Olympic stage as well. We all know that every Olympic, just given they're going to get a medal of some sort, but they also still have that their traditional the kaya traditional Korean bow, and they shoot at their traditional archery ranges. There we go.
All right, have a look at this.
Wow.
So okay. I got this in Korea. They gave me this little fan because it's kind of hot.
Nice.
But
okay.
Basically, I'll try and get that in focus.
Yeah.
So can you read that?
If the transit.
No,
it's
but
in
basically
Korean.
what this is but this was basically like a recognition of this archer. I'm ashamed that I can't remember his name, but basically he is kind of credited with developing the Korean shooting style as is sort of known. And
really?
But yeah, they do have the traditional Korean bows with thumb draw, I believe, and
correct.
And that's still I'm not sure quite how popular it is, but that still is alive and well. And I've also seen some of the facilities where they do that in South Korea when I was training with Kim Hyung Tech.
Some of their ranges, they have their target is like a big square board and a big red circle, and there's certain points for hitting. And the
distance is huge. It's like 150 meters or something.
It's something nuts. It's like over 100 meters, and their draw is like way past the ear. It's like literally to like the extent of the limbs, and can't really go any further. But that's obviously so that they can reach the target. So the arrows are like on average 32-33 inches. But it's nice to see that they still hold that heritage, whereas a lot of other countries have lost that and they're just only kind of focusing on the more modern style Olympic archery, you know. So I always, whenever I'm teaching or I'm talking about countries to look at or civilizations, I always mention people like, you know, Japan, Korea, places like this where, again, like I say, they straddle both. They've got a foot in the past and a foot in the present and stroke future as well. So I think this is why it's such a strong cultural thing. It's ingrained in the people's, like, you know, Korean, okay, archery is going to come in this in terms of their identity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's something we can talk about. I see our time's running down for this next
Yeah,
part
we're gonna pause in a second. We're gonna continue. We've got a few minutes if you can squeeze something in, 2 minutes or so.
But actually, what you were saying was very relevant. I was going to ask you because, like, so I'm just a boring Olympic style recurver, but for yourself, you know, you teach multidisciplinary archery. So what I was going to ask you actually was, across disciplines, you know, what can we learn from learning and shooting different disciplines? And, you know, do you see any commonalities or even any contradictions among a shooting styles? So that's what I'm curious about here.
Sure. I think, you know, in brief, you know, I have some experience and some exposure on the traditional shooting styles, like you mentioned about thumb draw. So I shoot thumb release, or I say thumb draw, with either, you know, I have a Korean kaya bow, I have some Turkish bows and different other bows. I also have a bare bow kit and then a freestyle kit. For me anyway, I feel to be a complete archer, you have to know all different styles so you can appreciate the past and the present, right? There are definitely some similarities. If you take all the clothing away, the bare bones is the same. The basic technique that doesn't change. The mechanics doesn't change. It's only the small details. Okay, instead of pulling with fingers, you're pulling with your thumb. Instead of you know, this type of release, you have a different type of release. Aiming is obviously going to be very different. One is instinctive, one is using, you know, the sights and things like that. But the mechanics, really, the bare bones of it, I feel is very much the same. Once you've got that, and this is something that you alluded to, this is why you focus so much on the basics. You can never go wrong on that. If you have that strong foundation, what you build on that is only going to be strengthening that. So it's super important that, you know, one of the things that I teach, and I have no doubt you teach it as well, as a very common thing, is the blank boss, blank bail shooting, very close distance. That's actually a very traditional method in the Seljuk Ottoman style shooting. They call it turba, turba shooting, and basically you're just shooting at a bale of hay or something. You know, you're shooting at nothing really, but you're just focusing on your technique, because the arrows are only going to land according to how you deliver the shot. So you're not worried about shooting a particular spot or anything like that. You're just working on that consistency and that grouping, you know. They also have a thing called kepaze, which is like X number of pulls, you know, we've got to do each week to get that muscle memory as well. Let's pause this. We're going to get to part 3.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.